In the intro, I mentioned that you are driving the company's transformation to become AI native across product, engineering, and operations. I'm really excited to understand what does AI native mean to you, both in like concept and in practice?
Yeah, the concept piece is probably the easier piece to talk about. Conceptually, like it's same as like digital native from when like the internet was born many years ago. With any sort of wave of innovation, I think you have the folks that really thought about things from first principles in terms of that like innovation, and like in the abstract sense, I see AI native being about the folks, the companies that are really either just starting in the age of AI, like they were born today, right? And so everything they do is just shaped by the existence of AI and the ability to use AI.
We've all been operating in this kind of like traditional SDLC model for a while, regardless of whether you consider yourself agile or you're in waterfall or you're doing modern agile. Like your method, your framework doesn't really matter. We're still operating in something where there's initiation and discovery, right? And then development and deploy, and then you close, and we want to repeat this process and grow. How is the traditional SDLC changing in an AI native organization?
Oh man, this is this is my favorite topics. Growing up in the industry, waterfall was always like the evil thing. We can go much deeper into a problem space without ever like writing a line of code, right? So I find myself doing a lot more planning with AI to a much deeper level than I would have done without AI. Now, obviously, there are some things that AI can't do. It's probably not very good at predicting like how people react to your product. Like every AI will tell you have amazing PMF. Be like, this is the best idea ever. And so, the challenges you should be taking on are much more complex than perhaps you would have done 2 years ago.
That idea of being on a customer success call or hearing their concerns and having a working prototype at the end of that session is like, that is the future, right?
Yeah. I dream of like a workflow where, I have my transcription tool that is like recording the meeting, and then it's streaming, and it identifies like a product need, and it automatically spins up like an agentic workflow that then like builds the thing automatically. But, yes, like it's a whole new way of working. And what I would like to do is empower everyone at the company to be able to do that.
Another thing that we're hearing a lot about in terms of new ways of working is swarms. So what are swarms and how are they being used at Slate?
Yeah, I think it's one of those. It's slight marketing speak, but for me, I think it was swarm of a lot of agents working together, but in a very collaborative like way with potential like real-time communication between them. When I am tackling a very challenging problem, I won't just have one agent do it, because there are all sorts of problems with like context window management or context management. The scope is just too big.
Dan, we just got done with Adam Creeger. Amazing episode. But first, for our listeners or maybe our watchers on YouTube, don't adjust the contrast of your monitor. I do have a black eye from playing rugby this weekend. I play twice a year, and this happens sometimes. But our episode was awesome. It was amazing to have a technical resource on. We don't normally have people with strong engineering backgrounds on the pod. So Dan, what did we learn today?
Well, we learned, Sean, that you can't play rugby on the weekends anymore.
That's true.
Fantastic conversation with Adam. Not often you get to have the CTO of a company like Slate join us. Learned, well, for one thing, what AI native really, what it means, especially in the day-to-day. We learned about swarming AI agents. I would have a great conversation about how roles are changing with AI. Spoiler, there's a world where a waterfall might be coming back, and it might be a meaningful way to solve problems. So I'm really excited to get in the conversation. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. Today, we are with Adam Creeger. He is the CTO of Slate, where he leads technology strategy and is driving the company's transformation to become AI native across product, engineering, and operations. He's worked for a lot of companies you've heard of, and now he's even got his own tool in market for helping you make your ideas come alive called iloom. We're going to get into that later, but first, hi, thanks for being with us today.
Hello, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on.
In the intro, I mentioned that you are driving the company's transformation to become AI native across product, engineering, and operations. I've been reading this term AI native for a while. You are one of the first straight C-suite technical resources that we've had on the pod in a while. I'm really excited to understand what does AI native mean to you, both in concept and in practice.
Yeah, the concept piece is probably the easier piece to talk about. Conceptually, it's same as digital native from when the internet was born many years ago. With any sort of wave of innovation, I think you have the folks that really thought about things from first principles in terms of that innovation, and then the folks that kind of sprinkle that innovation on top of what they're doing without any sort of more significant or fundamental shifts in strategy. And in the abstract sense, I see AI native being about the folks, the companies that are really either just starting in the age of AI, like they were born today, right? And so everything they do is shaped by the existence of AI and the ability to use AI. But it also applies to the companies that are realizing the full scale of what AI means for both the product they build, the way they operate, the way people will interact with them, and really imagine things from the ground up. And in some ways, it's easier to start from scratch as an AI native company because you don't have to really build the car while it's moving per se, but you are starting from scratch, right? Whereas if you have a sort of a company, a product that's out there in the market, to make it AI native, you have to essentially change some of the fundamental aspects of the product of the company, but while continuing to serve and delight your existing customers and employees even.
Yeah.
So, there's that really, it's about, to me, AI native is about allowing AI to sort of transform every part of the business, every part of the company from the way you operate, what you build, what you sell, the way that customers can interact with your product. All of those things need to change, not just adding an AI chatbot to the side of your product. Right. Okay. That is the classic AI native. I don't have a word for the opposite of AI native. AI invasive. I'm not sure, but it's a to be AI native. It requires this deep exercise in reimagination and just imagination. And at Slate, we are a creative tooling company for social media professionals and beyond. And yeah, we could build a chatbot that helps you generate AI content, right? That would be the most obvious way of sprinkling AI on top, but it's really important to us that we don't do that. I can't go into every single detail because it's still under wraps, but what we are doing at Slate is we are really examining what our customers want. And we know our customers very well. I think that's one of the things that gives us an unfair advantage in the space. What do folks, the social media professionals, really want from AI in the context of creative tooling? We are embedding that throughout the product. We're embedding it, we're changing the way that people could even interact with the product. We are changing the entire way we operate as a company. Now we are embracing the ability for non-engineers to ship code, which is becoming more and more common. But I see fundamental shifts in the roles of engineers, the roles of product managers, designers, even technical support, people that are very familiar with the product, very familiar with the customer, but up until very recently haven't been able to make meaningful contributions directly to the product. All that is changing. And I think in an AI native company, like the just the day to day in the company, who does what, the roles, right? The owners of things are going to look very different.
Yeah, I like to hear more about that, right? Most of the folks that I work with are not AI native in the standpoint of they're starting new companies born today, right? And they're trying to react to, where the industry is going. Really curious to hear, what advice would you have for those companies, coming from, your share as a CTO who is going through that transformation in Slate? Just how do you tackle the changes to the product that you're delivering, but also how do you kind of get the people on board?
Yeah, I think the advice I'd give people, like leaders looking to sort of like enable that change in their companies, is look for the people that are naturally gravitating towards this change. Like, don't, in every company, even if you're a small company of 20 people, you are going to have a few people that are very excited about this, a few people that are very like reserved and fearful, right? And then like some in between. It's going to be a spectrum. I would look for those people who are very excited and really interested in pushing the boundaries of what their current role is and even what's possible at the company, and forget as much as you can about their current position, right? So, and whatever kind of like preconceived notions you had about what the person in that role could do, because those people are going to break down the boundaries and like just almost like break down the cells of your company and become the DNA that like builds up the company from scratch, because that is what is necessary. And you need to really also be mindful of those folks that aren't quite so aggressively on board, right? It's some of those people will come around. It's about understanding what they're afraid of. I think AI will fundamentally change the kind of jobs we do. I don't think it will do anything like kill software engineers. I don't think that's right at all. It's gonna it's gonna replace software engineers in the same way that like email replaced paper. It didn't. So, I don't think that we like there's people have got that much to be worried about. The thing they have to worry about, like that the cliche is the thing you need to fear is like the fear itself. Like if you become paralyzed and closed-minded to all this, then that will be a problem. But in terms of like allowing a company to change, like yes, recognizing the people who can lead that change throughout the organization organically, I think is really important. The other one is to put clear incentives and guardrails in place so people know what they need to be doing. There is like the extreme version of this, which is the corporate leaderboards around token spend and token, like the more the better, right? And some people spending like billions of tokens a month just to top these leaderboards.
That's Hogwarts House Cup of token management,
basically, of token usage. Yeah, like that's not the way to do it either. I think just incentivizing smart, smart AI usage, measuring that, being very transparent about what you're measuring and why, and again allow the people to make their own choices.
We teach something here called it's an AI fluency scale. It's just a maturity model, but one of the things that we say is like the bottom of the scale. You find out when we do this training, like you have some agency. There are other people with you that are not really super far advanced on their AI journey, right? We also talk about the top of the scale. One of the biggest things, if you reach like the teacher and trailblazer level on the scale, is that you actually have a responsibility as a teacher, right, to make your training accessible or like make yourself accessible to people on the bottom of the scale. You're not going to be able to move somebody from like a 2 to a 5 overnight, right? There's no way, right? There's no way to reliably do that and like make sure that that person has a good foundation of their AI understanding, so that they don't just start burning hundreds of thousands of tokens. Right. So roles are changing. We know that there is probably disparity in terms of like our AI fluency across organizations. We've all been operating in this kind of like traditional SDLC model for a while, regardless of whether regardless of whether you consider yourself agile or you're in waterfall or you're doing modern agile. Like your method, your framework doesn't really matter. We're still operating in something where there's initiation and discovery, right? And then development and deploy, and then you close, and we want to repeat this process and grow. How is the traditional SDLC changing in an AI native organization?
Oh man, this is this is one of my favorite topics. So I, growing up in the industry, waterfall was always like the evil thing. I remember, like, it was very much like agile, whether you called like, I worked at a company that practiced extreme programming, which was like all pairing all the time, like very the opposite of a lot of traditional like SDLCs. I I have seen a big shift in how I want to work when it comes to AI. And I think the thing that I have realized is that Agile was really a mitigation of a few things, which was humans are very limited in our abilities, and it's very difficult for us to reason about things when they're abstract.
Yeah.
Right. So when we thought about a software project, and like an app or a system, until it was real, until you really started playing with it, you didn't really have much of a ability to understand all the problems you'll face, right? And some of those are like very solvable by AI, and some are not, right? But now with AI, we can go much deeper into a problem space without ever like writing a line of code, right? So, I find myself doing a lot more planning with AI to a much deeper level than I would have done without um, AI. I don't think that like what I could do now with Claude, right, and a good Claude level would have been possible like without AI in terms of just thinking problems through. I would have spent a lot more time doing it and done it to a lot lower quality. So we mitigated that by just building like in chunks, like choosing how much we wanted to discover at once, design and build and test, and then um, and I suddenly realized that like actually like when in the world of AI, like a waterfall is actually it's achievable. You can get really good results because when you go really deep into planning something, you get a lot like you explore the problem space a lot better, and you've got this very like smart like coworker suddenly that is not perfect and will absolutely lie to you and will absolutely mislead you unless you call it out. But they are still a really good thought partner, and you could do a lot higher quality planning, a lot higher quality research, and the end result is much like bigger and in terms of scope, and much more ambitious in terms of scope, but also much more well thought through. And it resembles more of like an accelerated waterfall than an intentional like de-scoping exercise that we did under Agile, where we'd say, no, like the purpose of this sprint is very clearly this, it is not this. Agile, you spent a lot of time defining the boundaries of what you were trying to achieve in order to manage the amount of planning and like unknowns, essentially. Whereas with AI sort of assisted coding or agentic coding, you can go really deep and like go create a much bigger scope and deliver it much more quickly. And it resembles like more of a waterfall mentality. And I think it's going to be an interesting shift back towards the like emphasis on planning. that I think will happen, once, because in Agile, sure, you planned, but you intentionally limited what you were planning.
Yeah. Are you saying like you think that maybe the time that we took to define the boundaries around MVP, we still need some sort of boundary, but that time is compressed, and actually that time that you used to spend on being like what is out of scope, it's now going to be spent on like how do we actually deliver more in this like initial and kind of like
and
the
first deeper, going way deeper. And into even on like your first version. Now, obviously, there are some things that AI can't do. It's probably not very good at predicting like how people react to your product. Like every AI will tell you have amazing PMF. Be like, this is the best idea ever. Like, you should definitely do this. What a winner, right? And so there's definitely reasons to limit the scope and ship something that isn't like insanely like detailed or or like ambitious. But and again, AI is a good thought partner to help you come up with that MVP, but I certainly wouldn't trust its like definition or its predictions of PMF. Like I think that's something you have to evaluate for real, like just as you would before. And in fact, I would still tell people if they're thinking of building a new product, a new service, the first thing to do is to try and emulate it without any tech. Like, if you could do it with a spreadsheet, do it with a spreadsheet. Try that. And but to be honest with you, I also maintain that the kind of SaaS products that simply wrap a spreadsheet are the ones that will go away.
Yeah.
And so, the challenges you should be taking on are much more complex than perhaps you would have done 2 years ago. And actually, I think we're in this learning phase now of like everyone vibe coding their own products, launching them as SaaS because they would have been SaaS products 3 years ago. But now they're not solving big enough problems to be a viable SaaS product on their own. So, I think that it is more important than ever to understand your MVP because it's so easy to build stuff. But yet it's because it's so easy to build stuff, you have to solve a problem that's inherently very difficult and is not just some data crud style problem. It has to be something that takes real experience beyond which an LLM could provide.
All right, so it sounds like we're not running our businesses through Excel anymore, but maybe Excel with Copilot, maybe? But yeah, you said something that is interesting, right? This idea with AI, like maybe the concept of waterfall is kind of coming back because of the way we can go deeper. Yeah, let's go to something Sean and I have been hearing talk about a lot. Is like the role of the product manager is in a lot of ways becoming more important. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on as product people, like how can we manage the going deeper on the problem with all the other demands on us?
Yeah, I think the good news is that you could empower other people to go deeper too, right? I think the product manager more than ever has become a role about providing context. I think that PMs, the most powerful thing they can do in an organization is provide context to other people. I think a big anti-pattern that has existed for a while is for PMs to make all the decisions. In the short term, it is good, like, fast decision making. In the long term, it becomes a bottleneck, right? Because only if you have one PM working with a team of like 10 to 20 engineers, for example, instead of having 10 to 20 decision makers, you only have one decision maker. And then as the team scales, as the company scales, the knowledge just doesn't proliferate. That context just doesn't proliferate. So I think PMs really, the role that PMs should always have been providing is primarily context and project to engineers to help them make their own decisions, help them have the information and the techniques with which to do product management at a more tactical level, right? I think now PMs should be elevated to a much more strategic role where it's like really understanding the long-term vision of the company or the product and like helping translate that to like engineers who are working on building out the product and making their own decisions, and elevating them to own the business outcomes, not just like the code, right? And also like PMs should be using AI to communicate ideas much more effectively, right? Or even like ship initial versions of things, right? And this is what I say. If you ask, this isn't just engineers, but I apply it humorously just to engineers. But like, if you want an engineer to do something, like if you ask them to do it, sure they'll get it done, or they'll But if you do it wrong, they will like fix it so quick. So having a PM, and I mean that with love, I'm the same, right? If someone asks me to do something, I'm like, oh, okay, well, if someone does it and I'm like, no, it's wrong, like, oh, like somehow it activates another part of my brain. My wife hates this about me. But I think like PMs can move things along by shipping their versions of things. And that's going to like suddenly, like, again, we've seen this at Slate, shipping a first version of something, whether it's an engineer does it or a PM does it, or a member of a technical support team does it, it suddenly creates these conversations that move things forward. And like that is another tool that PMs have now that they've never had before. So to answer your question, like I don't think it's just on the PMs to go deep on things, right? I think it's really about the PMs to just provide all the context that's going to enable other folks to go deep, right? Otherwise, you will still be the bottleneck. And whether that be that context comes from your own deep research, a lot of context around like the business and what the business needs and the goals of the business, to just like communicating your vision in new ways to allow other people to understand what you want. That to me, I think, is how the PM role like is going to change.
Okay.
And it all depends on the type of like PMs. I think a lot of the tactical stuff goes away.
Yeah, I think you're right on there. And it's right. A picture's worth 1,000 words, and a prototype that you can use AI with to communicate what you're thinking is probably worth like 10,000 words. So I think, it's an exciting direction. Skip the part where you build the thing, have the demo, and then have everyone after hours of work realize that they hate it. Now we can do that in half a day, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's crazy. And in fact, it's happening right now. I sort of heard I was in a call with our customer success team, and they talked about a common customer pain point that Slate has had for a little while, and just like it's one of those things that's been on the backlog. And I spun up in the call. I spun up Iloom, which is this agentic like coding tool that I built on top of Claude Code, and it just in the background worked on implementing version 1 of this feature. And it did it. And with a bit of theater, I actually demoed it at the end of the customer success call. And that wasn't the final product, right? It did a lot of the work, but it led to this whole like conversation about what UI paradigm should we use for this? Like, is this what does this mean for our customers if they could do this? Like, is this the right thing strategically? And it inspired a designer to come up with their own UI model for this. And it's great. And today we reviewed them and we're like talking about the strengths and the weaknesses of both approaches. And we could just like give them to the team and give them to our own marketing team who are amazing social media marketers just to play with and be like, which one feels like right for what you want to do. But yeah, they're not Figma clickable prototypes. They're like real versions of the product that I built while already in a meeting, like in the background, and then a designer built themselves, like when they saw mine. And that's a new way of working. And that's the kind of, I love it. Like, it's great to be able to get such high value signal so quickly from such a broad group of people.
Yeah, that idea of being on a customer success call, hearing their idea and having a working prototype, or hearing their concerns and having a working prototype at the end of that session is like, that is the future, right? Like that's,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's you know, and it's I dream of like a workflow where, you know, I have my transcription tool that is like recording the meeting, and then it's streaming, and it identifies like a product need, and it automatically spins up like an agentic workflow that then like builds the thing automatically. Now, if you want to talk about token maxing and burning tokens, that is going to be like, I'd win that user fantasy. But there's a good leaderboard, 15 things a day, and like maybe 3 of them would work. But you know, yes, like it's a whole new way of working. And what I would like to do is empower everyone at the company to be able to do that, not just me and my like toolkit.
I want to make sure that we get to this question before the end of the episode, because again, I mean, we asked about the term of AI native. What does that mean? Another thing that we're hearing a lot about in terms of new ways of working is swarms. So what are swarms and how are they being used at Slate?
Yeah, I think, you know, it's one of those, it's slight marketing speak, but you know, for me, I think it was swarm of a lot of agents working together in a very collaborative like way with potential like real-time communication between them. You know, I think I also think of swarms of drones, and I guess there are some similarities. But you know, as like the way I use swarms is, and I did not use it for this you know, the instance I just talked about on that customer success call, but when I am tackling a very challenging problem, I won't just have one agent do it, because you know, there are all sorts of problems with like context window management or context management. You know, the scope is just too big for one like agent instance to really run, and maybe some parts of the work you want to do with a different kind of model, a different model rather. So when I'm working on something really complex, you know, there's a feature in iloom which is like it's a plan and epic, and you describe it. It really goes deep with you on the planning. This is perhaps similar to the brainstorm functionality of like superpowers, the superpowers plugin for Claude Code, and there's also other equivalents. Right, this isn't not claiming this is like unique and innovative. It's just a really key part of the process. But the planning piece really goes down and asks you a lot of questions, right? To my point earlier, it's more like a waterfall process where you really try and think through a lot of the problem space up front rather than just building it in C, right? You think through the problem space, think through the tech choices, the data model. You know, if you're working in it's very good in a brownfield code base, because you'll look at the different repos and what they do, and like understand where the best place to make these changes, and obviously scope out what those changes are and how to validate them. At the end of that process, you will have essentially one epic task, like an epic per repo, right? And each of those epics will have a web of child issues within them. And those child issues are essentially a DAG, a directed acyclical graph, which shows you essentially, like, it shows an agent how to execute these tasks, like which tasks depend on what, like a rough ordering, what can be run in parallel, what has to be done in sequence. And then when you basically kick off each of these epics separately, you can do it at the same time or do them sequentially, it's up to you. And each of that then spins up a swarm of agents for each epic. And that swarm will be multiple agents, and their job is to execute each of these different issues in parallel and run through a really structured workflow, which is absolutely like the best way to tackle feature development with AI, which is each issue, right? And so each agent, and there's maybe a swarm of 30, each agent runs through a research process where it analyzes the code base. It runs through planning, where it takes that sort of the results of that analysis, and it creates a plan to solve the sort of the problem at hand, the task at hand, and only that task at hand. But it then goes into implementation, it goes into code review, and then like finally at the end of each wave, there's like a verification step where it makes sure everything works together and everything plugs together. So like every swarm operates in a wave, and the sort of the agents just chew through this very complex, potentially like backlog of tasks. And I've absolutely hit the Claude Max 20 limits in like one session. Like my 5-hour limit was just like destroyed by having 25, 30 agents go through this. But at the end of that, the result is incredible. The result is something that, it's not perfect, right? I don't think anyone can claim to one-shot something of high complexity, but it is something that is leaps and bounds ahead of where you'd be able to get with just like one or two agents working on something, and like way further ahead than you could possibly get without the assistance of AI.
How much are you involved in designing like the workflow that you expect them to go through? Do you have to define that, or is something else driving the definition of the way that you expect them to execute tasks?
You mean the swarm? Like how I like? Yeah, like this. I mean, it is everyone is going to implement this differently. Inside iloom, which is what my experience of building it. Like a lot of it is predefined. Like the steps that it goes through, this like research plan, implement like code review, like there's a verification step. That stuff that's pretty like that's predefined, but the inputs to that come in a couple of ways. There's the task definition, right? So the task itself is the prompt. Then there's also the workflow configuration. You could actually configure it to automatically review any of the steps with other models. So right now, for complex tasks, I have Gemini review the plans it comes up with. And more often than not, there are meaningful improvements that get made. I also have Gemini do code reviews. I found that to be a really good model. Gemini 3.1 Pro does a really good job of code reviewing. So you can customize it that way. And then ultimately, under the covers, it's just all Claude code. So things like the Claude MD or rules or skills, they still get used. So if you need to customize what happens with when you work in a certain part of the code base, that will still happen as per the Claude MD or the rules files.
Okay.
So the iloom workflow is fairly fixed, which is intentional. Like it's not supposed to solve every problem ever. It's just really helpful to do feature development.
Awesome. Adam, this has been super informative. I would have to hear, right, you mentioned Loom. What's coming from Slate that we should be excited about?
Yeah, Slate is like, we've got very exciting things going on. So first of all, it's like as I talked about at the beginning, building AI into the fundamentals of the product. Like I think it's, we are going to see like a major shift in the capabilities of Slate, how it's used. And we are doing it in a way that is meaningful and beneficial. I think we are all at Slate very keenly aware of the risk of turning a creative tool into a slop factory.
Mm.
We do not want people to be churning out AI slop with Slate. The unique value prop of the product is to create content in line with like brand guidelines, right? And some brand guidelines can be expressed in very like tangible things like the colors, the fonts, right? But something that's a lot harder is the quality bar that a brand has. And creating a tool that makes it very difficult to create AI slop is like, I think, going to be a valuable proposition to brands that care deeply about what gets produced in their name. So, we're very keen on that. we're shipping a lot more. Like we are leveraging AI to really empower our engineers to ship a lot more features across the board. So, I don't want to go into too many details, but the kind of work you'll be able to do within Slate is going to grow. Like right now, we occupy a particular piece of the workflow, and we will be growing that position over this year significantly. We're going to be able to do a lot more with the product, a lot more collaboration, a lot more media management. And on top of that, we're also hiring more engineers as well. I do not believe that we should lay off engineers because of AI or even keep headcount the same. I'm a big believer in doing a lot more with more.
Yeah.
Instead of just trying to do the same with less or more with the same. It's like, no, I want to do like an order of magnitude more with more engineers.
Yeah, that's what our belief is too. Our belief is now is the time for investment, not the actual time time to cut the workforce, right? Tell us about iloom and what this is and how people should use it.
Yeah, iloom was really built out of a need that I had last year to work on multiple things at once with AI. I just realized that once I got into this very consistent workflow, it meant I went from talking to pair programming with Claude and saying, "Hey Claude, do this, now do this," and it was no longer so interactive. I found myself hands off the keyboard for 10 minutes at a time. So I was like, wait, what else can I do in those 10 minutes? So I could do other stuff. I can work on other AI projects. And so I was doing different things at one time. And then, I did that and it was a lot of fun, but I'd end the day feeling very stressed and overwhelmed because I was context switching between all these things. And then I was like, what can I do? And this is the kind of challenge that I love. What can I do to really make it much easier for people to context switch between the different agents that you have running and different workflows that you have running on different tasks. And, that came to this insight that there's a lot that basically it's very easy. It's very hard rather for it to understand what the agent is thinking, but it's very easy to ask the agent what it's thinking. And so really there's just no good place for it to live. And so the iloom workflow is all about exposing the agent's insights, the agent's assumptions, the insights, the risks, and the decisions to the user, right? In both real time, but also storing it, persisting it. And it doesn't persist it in markdown files that just get littered and are very difficult to manage over time. It just stores it on the pull request or on the issue that just driving the sort of the task. And so what that means is in real time, people can see what's going on. You can see it. And then over time, you can go back. And if you look at a PR that was closed 3 months ago and you're like, why the hell did the AI build this thing? You can be like, it thought that was the assumption. Okay, I got it. Or we explicitly made a decision to do X, Y, and Z. And it's the kind of things that I did this for myself, right? So I could switch easily between these different workflows. But what I realized was that it actually made it a lot easier for teams to use it too. So now, teams, people solo developers can use it. It's a lot for solo developer. It works for me because I'm kind of slightly old school and I like a lot of I like myself to be disciplined and have process. But it really helps where teams where instead of a developer pushing up a 3,000 line PR that was written by code and is just here's your PR, go review it. Instead, the PR actually has a lot of information around the assumptions that the AI made and the sort of what the AI was thinking and the thought process. So that, and what you find is when you read that, don't need to dig into the code so much, because often when you're reviewing code as a domain expert, you're like, okay, did they take into account this situation? Did they take into account that? How have they handled that? And if your PR documentation already has that information, you actually don't need to look so much at the code.
If people want to check this out, they go to iloom.ai. So it's iloom.ai. I said iloom because I'm from Western New York, and any syllable that's driven by a vowel has to be hit as hard as possible. Like that's how we know how to talk.
That is the why. That's why the L is lowercase, so it doesn't look like it's an iPod, an iPhone. It's like no, it's but it's Illume as an illuminate, spelled weirdly, and also an intelligent loom.
So thank you so much for being with us today. I got a couple of takeaways that I just want to like recapture. I think that like when we initially talked about AI native, you referenced that we really need to understand how roles are changing, and that how your expectation of a role doesn't need to fit like a specific definition really anymore, right? So how are people's roles or expectations around the roles changing within your organization with the adoption of AI? I think you even mentioned in our pre-production call, you had somebody who was like in customer support who actually built something and was like, hey, how could we actually implement this? I think that customers would find this useful. Like that's the type of thing that we're going to see.
Well, that has happened multiple times now. Which AMs, support folks, designers. Yeah.
So love that. But like that's how you're going to end up reimagining your workflows. You also said that we should find people within your organization that are naturally gravitating towards AI-led change. We kind of reference those people as kind of like you're someone who is recognized by their peers as a trailblazer. Like those are the people that you want to find in your organization because they're going to eventually get you to organizational growth. But at the same time, don't leave the people that are maybe earlier on in their AI journey behind. They still have a lot of useful knowledge, right? They still know the problems that your software needs to solve, right? And are still important parts of the way that you're going to deliver value in the future. Just because they're behind on the technology doesn't mean that they're less important to the business.
Yeah.
I really liked your idea around like this concept of MVP scope in the future needs to be able to solve a bigger problem, right? Smaller problems, like really defined things that you can build a nice tight project around is not necessarily the way that we're going to be executing work in the future. So think about solving bigger problems. And then what you are seeing within Slate is that product managers are having more success if they understand that their goals, the goal of their role is to provide context, but also to make decisions, right? So just because they're providing context means that they are aligning people, but they're also making decisions that are unblocking work. So that's really,
and ideally, it's more like perhaps a tiebreaker more than a decision maker. Like they should, verify. It's like the trust but verified paradigm, and give a lot of deep context to folks, but just like make sure the output still aligns with the vision. Like it probably means you miss some context, right? If not, but it doesn't mean that you could just hand over decisions to other people.
Yeah.
You're still ultimately responsible.
And then lastly, swarms are ways to use multiple agents to solve complex problems, but also to quickly burn through your token limits. So
very quickly. Exceptional.
Very quickly. All right, Adam, thank you so much for your perspective today. We really appreciate having a more technically adept mind on the podcast because it's something that we actually have not done enough of in our last like 20 or 30 episodes. So thank you for bringing that to our audience, and we really appreciated having you here.
Yeah, it's really great to be here. Yeah, thank you very much. I'm glad you think of me as technically adept or as a technically inept.